The maternity ward smells wrong. It's all fake lavender cleaner and that sharp hospital smell. Like they're trying to make you feel safe. But the fluorescent lights buzz too loud, and Imani can feel her heart pounding as she slides down the cold wall. Her red maternity dress bunches up as she sits on the freezing floor. Her hand shakes as she covers her 7-month pregnant belly. She's trying to breathe, trying to calm down. This was supposed to be her safe place. The one place nobody could hurt her. You really chose this place? The voice cuts through the silence like a knife. Imani's breath catches in her throat. It's a voice she's tried to forget for 3 years. Sharp, mean, the kind of cruelty that knows exactly where to cut. Rylan walks toward her slowly. His boots hit the floor hard with each step. He's not in a hurry. He stops right in front of her and crouches down so his face is level with hers. She can smell the bourbon on him and something else, that familiar anger he always carried. He raises one finger and holds it inches from her nose. He doesn't touch her. He doesn't have to. This is how he works, making you feel small without laying a hand on you. Look at you, he says, his voice dripping with disgust. Sitting on the floor like that's where you belong. Imani tries to speak, but nothing comes out. Her mouth is dry. She looks down the empty hallway. No nurses, no doctors, nobody. The silence feels heavy, like it's choking her. Rylan smiles. It's not a kind smile. Pregnant, he says, making the word sound dirty. Again. He moves his finger in a slow circle in the air. Let me guess. Does this one have a father? Or are you just collecting mistakes? Her belly tightens. The baby kicks hard against her hand. A tiny fighter. Imani looks straight at Rylan. She's not just scared anymore. She's being hunted. In a hospital. In the place meant to protect her. Then she notices it. A small red light blinking on the wall behind him. Camera. Rylan isn't looking at it. He's too busy looking at her, enjoying this. He didn't find her by accident. He followed her here. He wanted this moment on camera. But there's something else. A shadow stretches across the far wall. Someone in a black coat. And suddenly, the question isn't why Rylan is here. It's who's been watching him this whole time. If you're still listening right now, I need to know something. Do stories like this deserve to be told, or should they stay buried? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in her place and let us know where you are watching from. The hum of the hospital is an indifferent witness. Rylan shifts his weight, the leather of his jacket creaking like a warning. He drops into a low crouch, his knees cracking, a sound that feels violent in the vacuum of the hallway. He is so close now that Imani can see the broken capillaries in his eyes, the remnants of a life fueled by vanity and vitriol. Look at you, he repeats, his voice a low-frequency sandpaper scrape. The great Imani, reduced to a puddle on the floor. He points that same steady, accusing finger, holding it inches from her forehead. I heard you were trying to start over. New job, new city. And yet, here we are. Some things never change. You're still just a girl waiting for a hand that's never coming. Imani's back is fused to the wall, the cold paneling leaching the warmth from her spine. Her fingers dig into the soft jersey of her red dress, her knuckles turning the color of bone. Every muscle in her body is coiled, a spring under too much tension. She feels the heat of shame crawling up her neck, a visceral, blotchy red that she hates because it's a visible surrender. But beneath the shame, a small, hard coal of anger begins to glow. She doesn't look away. She can't. To blink is to let him win. Rylan, she says, her voice a fragile thread she's trying not to snap. This is a maternity ward. Have some decency. He laughs, a short, sharp bark that echoes down the corridor and dies a lonely death. Decency? You're talking to me about decency? You're the one who walked out on a life I built for you. He leans in further, his shadow swallowing her completely. He smells of cold rain and a familiar, suffocating arrogance. You thought you were so strong. But look at you. You're still just a victim looking for a script. Around them, the hallway remains a graveyard. A nurse's station stands empty 50 feet away, a monitor flickering with a steady, green heart rate that feels like a mockery of the panic drumming in Imani's chest. The silence is a physical weight, a complicit bystander that refuses to intervene. Imani shifts, her hand instinctively tightening over her belly as the baby stirs again. It's a sharp, rolling movement, a reminder of the life that has no choice but to rely on her. She forces her breathing to level out, her ribs expanding against the fabric of her dress. She isn't the girl he broke 3 years ago. She is a fortress now, even if the walls are currently under siege. I'm not a victim, Rylan, she says, her voice gaining a deceptive velvet-smooth edge. I'm a mother, and you're just a ghost I forgot to exorcise. Rylan's face contorts, the smirk twisting into a sneer of pure, unfiltered condescension. He stands up slowly, looming over her like a shadow that refused to leave at dawn. A mother? He mocks, glancing down the long, empty hall with a theatrical shrug. To a child who's going to grow up wondering why their mother was always so alone. Because let's face it, Imani, who else is ever going to want someone with your baggage? He leans down one last time, his voice dropping to a whisper that feels like a physical stain. The truth is, no matter how many miles you run, you'll always be the woman no one came back for. He turns to leave, confident in his victory, unaware that the air behind him has just dropped 10 degrees, and the man in the black coat has finally stopped watching. The echoes of Rylan's laughter bounce off the sterile teal walls, but inside the vault of Imani's mind, the sound triggers a different vibration. The memory of a door clicking shut 3 years ago. It wasn't a cinematic exit. There were no grand speeches, only the suffocating weight of a packed suitcase and the taste of copper in her mouth from biting her lip to keep from screaming. Back then, Imani had been a shadow. She had lived in the periphery of Rylan's moods, navigating the jagged landscape of his ego like a hiker crossing a field of broken glass. She remembers the way he used to look through her, making her feel like a ghost in her own kitchen. Leaving him hadn't felt like a victory. It felt like an amputation. She had to cut away the part of herself that believed love was synonymous with endurance. She touches the swell of her stomach again, the jersey fabric of her red dress soft under her palms. This child isn't a mistake or baggage, as Rylan sneered. To Imani, this pregnancy is a living manifesto of her autonomy. It is the first thing in her life that belongs entirely to her. Grown from a soil she spent years tilling with tears and overtime shifts at the clinic. She hadn't waited for a night. She had become the fortress. She recalls the grueling first year after the split, the tiny studio apartment that smelled of damp wood and the generic brand oatmeal she ate for dinner so she could save for a deposit on a life. There is no shame in that memory, only a quiet, crystalline pride. She had learned the geometry of survival, calculating every penny and every breath until she no longer felt like she was drowning. Rylan thinks he is looking at the same girl who used to apologize for the way the sun hit the floorboards. He is wrong. He is looking at a woman who has mastered the art of the freeze response, not out of fear, but as a tactical assessment. She isn't reacting to his toxicity because his venom no longer matches her blood type. The injustice of his presence here, in the one hallway where she should be invincible, stings like salt in a fresh cut. But as she sits on the cold linoleum, she realizes she isn't waiting for the hallway to stop spinning. She is the center of the world, and he is just noise. A flash of a memory from 6 months ago flickers across her vision. A rainy night outside a closed subway station. A man with obsidian eyes and a voice like velvet over gravel. She had been panicked, lost in a city that felt too big. He hadn't reached out to grab her. He hadn't forced a rescue. He had simply stood in the downpour, a pillar of calm in a black wool coat, and given her the only piece of advice that ever stuck. "The world moves for those who panic," he had said, his gaze steady and unreadable. "If you ever feel unsafe, Imani, stand still. Let the danger reveal itself." Imani stops trembling. She exhales, her spine straightening against the blue paneling as she realizes the man from the subway isn't just a memory. The rhythmic tap-tap-tap of polished shoes is stopping right behind Ryland's arrogant shoulder. The memory of the rain returns, but this time it isn't cold. It is the night she met the man who now casts a long, geometric shadow over the hospital tile. 6 months ago, Imani had been caught in a torrential downpour outside a closed transit hub, her early pregnancy making her steps heavy and her heart prone to sudden, fluttering panics. She was a woman used to being hunted by bills, by memories of Rylan, by the sheer exhaustion of rebuilding a life from ash. He had appeared not as a savior, but as a stillness. He wore a black wool coat that seemed to absorb the streetlights. He didn't offer an umbrella or a ride. He simply stood 3 feet away, his presence creating a localized pocket of silence that the thunder couldn't penetrate. His face was a study in controlled lines. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes that held the weight of 1,000 secrets. He didn't look at her with the invasive pity she was used to. He looked at her as if she were a riddle he had already solved. "You are breathing as if the air is running out," he had said. His voice was a low, resonant frequency that vibrated in her chest. "Stop. The storm cannot enter your lungs unless you open your mouth to scream." She had been confused, even wary. In her world, men only approached when they wanted to take something. But he took nothing. He stayed until her heart rate leveled, until the "why should I care?" factor of her own survival felt like a physical weight again. She never asked his name. She never asked why a man who looked like he owned the city was standing in the mud with a stranger. She only knew that for the first time in years, the danger didn't feel like it was winning. Later, she would see him in the periphery of her new life, a black sedan idling at the end of her street, a table always reserved for her at the quietest corner of the bakery, though she never made a booking. It was a protection that didn't demand a thank you, a silent, interactive engagement with her safety that felt like an invisible shield. Now, back in the present, the sterile teal hallway of the maternity ward feels the same as that rainy night. The mystery box of his identity is still locked, but his energy is unmistakable. Rylan is still standing over her, his finger wagging like a metronome of mediocrity, completely oblivious to the fact that the atmosphere in the room has reached a boiling point. Imani looks up, not at Rylan, but past him. She follows the line of the polished floor to a pair of black leather Oxfords. They are immaculate, not a speck of hospital dust, not a scuff of compromise. The tap-tap-tap of the footstep stops. The silence that follows isn't empty. It is occupied. It is a pattern interrupt, so violent that even Rylan's mocking sneer begins to falter, his internal radar finally picking up the predatory signal behind him. Rylan starts to turn, his mouth already half open to bark a fresh insult. But the words die in his throat as he realizes he is no longer the most dangerous thing in the hallway. The air in the corridor doesn't just grow quiet. It grows heavy, the atmospheric pressure dropping as if a storm front has stalled directly over the maternity ward. Rylan, blinded by the intoxicating rush of his own perceived power, remains oblivious to the shift. He is a man performing a monologue in a theater that has already been surrounded. "You see this?" Rylan asks, gesturing broadly at the empty nurse's station and the abandoned hallway. "This is your future, Imani. A series of empty rooms and people who are too busy to care that you're drowning." He leans in, his shadow stretching across the teal floor like a stain. "You're a ghost story. A cautionary tale about what happens when you think you're better than the man who made you." Imani doesn't flinch. Her defiance has moved past words. It is now a physical frequency. She feels the baby give a singular, sharp kick against her ribs, a tiny, rhythmic heartbeat that acts as her internal countdown clock. She counts the pulses. 1, 2, 3. She isn't looking at Ryland's face anymore. She is looking at the polished black Oxfords reflecting the overhead lights behind him. Behind Ryland, Seo Jun stands as still as a statue carved from obsidian. He does not breathe with the jagged, emotional heat of the ex-husband. His respiration is slow, calculated, and terrifyingly calm. From his perspective, the scene is a violation of the natural order. This hospital sits on land his family protected for 3 generations. The very air Ryland is wasting belongs to the House of Seo. The security cameras in this wing aren't just recording. They are streaming directly to a private server in a penthouse 12 miles away. Ryland's finger is still hovering near Amani's nose, but his hand begins to tremble. Not from fear yet, but from a sudden, inexplicable chill that has settled into his marrow. The hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly changes pitch, a high-pitched whine that sets the teeth on edge. Pattern interrupt. Say something, Ryland urges, his voice cracking for the first time. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you aren't terrified. Amani finally looks him in the eye, her expression as smooth as glass. I'm not the one who should be terrified, Ryland. You've spent so much time looking down at me that you forgot to look behind you. The hallway lights flicker. A rhythmic, 3-beat pulse. On, off, on. It is the signal for a total lockdown, a mystery box of protocol that only those at the top of the hierarchy understand. The cooling system hums to a halt. The distant sound of a rolling hospital cart stops mid-squeak. Ryland opens his mouth to deliver the final blow of his tirade. A comment about her worthlessness that he has been refining in his head for years, but the sound never leaves his lips. He stops because a hand, encased in a black leather glove, has come to rest gently, almost affectionately, on his shoulder. It is not a violent grip. It is the weight of a mountain pressing down on a pebble. The mocking ends, not because Ryland has found his conscience, but because he has just realized the hand on his shoulder doesn't belong to a doctor. The hand on Ryland's shoulder is a physical pattern interrupt, a heavy, silent anchor that grounds the chaotic energy of the hallway. Ryland stammers, his body jerking as he tries to maintain his crouched position, but the weight above him is absolute. He looks up, expecting a security guard or an annoyed physician. Instead, he finds the void. Seo Jun does not look at Ryland. To the man in the black wool coat, the antagonist is a non-entity, a piece of industrial debris to be cleared. His focus is a laser, cutting through the sterile, antiseptic air to lock onto Amani. He ignores the finger Ryland is still shaking in the air. He ignores the insults still echoing in the teal corridor. Imani, Seo Jun says. His voice is a low-frequency hum, a sound that bypasses the ears and resonates directly in the marrow of the bone. It is the God frequency, calm, rhythmic, and devoid of the jagged heat of anger. At the sound of her name, the sharp, acidic knot of dread in Imani's stomach begins to loosen. It is not a rescue yet, but it is an acknowledgement. Seo Jun has been standing there for exactly 64 seconds, long enough to authorize the total digital isolation of this wing. Seo Jun moves. It is a slow, spatial positioning that feels like a glacier shifting. He walks around the frozen, kneeling Ryland as if he were a wet floor sign. He stops 3 feet from Imani, maintaining a respectful distance that emphasizes her agency rather than her vulnerability. He crouches, not to loom, but to bring his eyeline below hers. It is a gesture of profound respect, a visual contrast to Ryland's invasive, pointing finger. "Are you breathing?" Seo Jun asks softly. He doesn't ask if she's okay. He knows she isn't. He asks for the most basic proof of life, grounding her in the present. Amani exhales a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Her fingers, still gripped tightly against the crimson jersey of her dress, begin to relax. The freeze response that had locked her joints is melting into a warm, heavy relief. She looks into his obsidian eyes and sees a reflection of her own strength, not her shame. "I'm breathing," she whispers. Her voice is steady, a sharp contrast to the silence that has swallowed Rylan's bravado. Rylan, finally finding his voice, tries to stand. "Hey, I was talking to her." "Who the hell?" Seo Jun doesn't turn. He doesn't even blink. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a thin, silver device, a mystery box of technology. He taps a single button. "The baby?" Seo Jun asks, his voice remaining in that low, protective register. "Active," Amani replies, a small, defiant smile touching her lips as she feels a kick against her palm. "He's a fighter." "Good." Seo Jun nods once. Fighters deserve a quiet place to rest. A sudden, mechanical clack echoes from the far end of the hallway. Then another. The heavy, magnetic fire doors at the end of the corridor slide shut with a pneumatic hiss. The countdown clock has hit 0. The safety illusion of the public ward is gone, replaced by the reality of a fortress. Rylan spins around, his face draining of color as he watches the exits vanish. He rushes to the nearest door and pulls, but the handle doesn't budge. He is trapped in a teal-walled vacuum with a woman he thought was alone and a man he cannot define. The hospital hasn't just gone quiet. It has been disconnected from the world. And as the overhead lights dim to a soft, blue security glow, Rylan realizes the silence is no longer his weapon. It is his cage. The silence following the mechanical locking of the doors is absolute. It is a vacuum that sucks the air right out of Rylan's lungs. He stands by the sealed exit, his fingers still curled around a handle that has become part of the wall. He looks at the emergency exit sign. The light has shifted from a comforting green to a cold, predatory violet. Seo Jun finally stands, his movements fluid and unhurried. He doesn't look like a man about to fight. He looks like a man about to audit a failing business. He adjusts the cuff of his black wool coat, a silver watch glinting under the dim security lights. "The architecture of this building is quite specific," Seo Jun says, his voice cutting through the stillness like a piano wire. He isn't looking at Rylan. He is looking at the high-definition lens of the security camera mounted in the corner. The glass is reinforced. The walls are soundproofed to ensure the comfort of the mothers. It is a perfect container for things that need to be handled. This hospital wing wasn't just closed. His digital footprint was erased. For the next 20 minutes, this corridor does not exist on any public map or emergency dispatch. Rylan tries to summon his old bravado, but it comes out as a shaky, high-pitched mess. "You can't do this. I have rights. This is a public space. This is private land," Seo Jun counters, finally turning his head. His gaze is a physical weight, a pattern interrupt that stops Rylan's heart for a beat. "You are standing on a foundation funded by the Seo Group. The air you are breathing is filtered by systems my family maintains. You are not in a public space, Mr. Vance. You are in my home, and you have been very rude to my guest." Suddenly, the hallway is no longer empty. At both ends of the corridor, silhouettes materialize. They don't run. They don't shout. For men in charcoal suits appear from the shadows of the utility rooms, their earpieces glowing with a steady blue light. They move with a terrifying coordination, a geometric proof of power. They don't draw weapons. They simply stand, arms crossed, effectively shortening the world until Rylan is trapped in a 10-foot radius of his own fear. Rylan's finger, the one he had used to mock Amani's pregnancy, is now shoved deep into his pocket, trembling so hard his whole arm shakes. He looks at Amani, desperate for a spark of the old victim he could manipulate. But Amani is leaning back against the teal wall, her hands resting peacefully on her red dress. She isn't watching a rescue. She is watching a consequence. The "why should I care" factor has flipped. The audience, the invisible eyes behind the cameras, is now feasting on Ryland's disintegration. "What do you want?" Ryland stammers, backing away until his heels hit the baseboard. "Money? I'll leave. I'll just leave." Seo Jun takes a single step forward. The guards mimic the movement. The spatial positioning is perfect. The pressure in the room is so high that the fluorescent lights begin to buzz in a frantic, dying rhythm. "Leaving is a privilege you no longer control," Seo Jun whispers. Ryland looks at the men in suits, then at the locked doors, and finally at the man in the black coat who has dismantled his life without raising a finger. The realization hits him like a physical blow. He has spent his life bullying people who had nothing, only to accidentally walk into the path of a man who owns everything. Who the hell are you?" Ryland asks, his voice barely a breath. Seo Jun leans in, his face inches from Ryland's. His expression is cold as the linoleum floor. He doesn't answer. He simply looks at his watch as the second hand clicks toward a new minute. The silence returns, heavier than before. Ryland is left staring into the obsidian eyes of a ghost, realizing that some questions are only answered by what happens in the dark. If you're feeling the tension, don't get caught off guard by the next twist. Only those who stay focused see the end coming. The violet emergency lights cast long, rhythmic shadows across the ward. In the center of the storm, Ryland is shrinking, his back pressed against the locked double doors as he stares at the charcoal-suited wall of men. But Seo Jun has already moved his focus back to the only person in the room who matters. He doesn't reach down to pull Amani up. He doesn't treat her like a broken object to be gathered. Instead, he maintains his crouch, his spatial positioning reflecting a profound, silent respect. He places his hands on his own knees, keeping them visible and still. "The floor is cold, Amani," Seo Jun says, his voice a low, velvet vibration that cuts through the hum of the security grid. "But it is your choice when to leave it. If you wish to stay and let him scream into the silence, we will wait. If you wish to walk past him, the path is clear." Amani looks at his extended palm. Not a grab, but an offer. She feels the baby shift, a slow, rolling pressure that feels like a shared breath. For years, Ryland had dictated her movements, telling her when to sit, when to speak, and when she was allowed to be strong. Even a rescue, if forced, would be another form of control. She sees the secret in Seo Jun's eyes. He isn't here to be her hero. He is here to be her floor. "I don't need to hear him anymore," Amani says. Her voice is no longer a thread. It is a cord of steel. She places her hand in Seo Jun's. His grip is firm, a grounding wire, but he doesn't pull. He simply provides the leverage. Amani uses her own strength, her muscles tensing under the crimson jersey of her dress, and she rises. She stands tall, her spine clicking into place, her head held higher than Ryland's has ever been. She brushes a stray hair from her face, her movements slow and deliberate. She turns to Ryland. He looks pathetic, a small man in a large jacket, trembling in the house that Seo Jun built. The fear rolling off him is a physical scent, acrid and cheap. "You told me I was alone, Ryland," she says, her voice echoing in the soundproofed corridor. "But you were projecting. You're the one in a room full of people who don't know your name and wouldn't care if they did." Ryland's mouth twitches, a fish out of water. He looks at Seo Jun, then back at Amani, the realization dawning that his power was a safety illusion that shattered the moment a real force entered the room. Seo Jun steps back, giving her the lead. He falls into step half a pace behind her, a position of a protector, yes, but also of a second in command. This isn't a damsel being led out of a burning building. This is a queen walking through her own courtyard. As they move toward the far end of the hallway, the security guards part like a dark sea. Imani doesn't look back. She doesn't need to see the wreckage of her past to know she's finished with it. She realized then that this wasn't just a man keeping her safe. This was a man honoring her war. But as the doors ahead begin to open, she catches the look Seo Jun gives his lead guard. A silent command that suggests Ryland's night is only just beginning. Only those who watch the shadows know what happens when the lights go out. The transition from power to obsolescence is instantaneous. As Imani and Seo Jun reach the end of the teal corridor, the safety illusion Ryland built for himself doesn't just crack. It vaporizes. He is left standing in a vacuum of his own making, a man whose presence has been digitally and socially uninstalled. Seo Jun stops by the final set of double doors. He doesn't look back at Ryland, but he adjusts his silver watch with a rhythmic, mechanical click. "Mr. Vance," he says, his voice a low-frequency hum that vibrates against the soundproofed walls. "You came here for an audience. You wanted to be seen. I have granted your wish." The footage of Ryland's behavior hasn't just been recorded. It has already been dispatched to his employer's HR department and his primary investors. By the time he reaches the parking lot, his professional life will be a ghost story. Ryland tries to shout, but the charcoal-suited men step forward in perfect, geometric coordination. They don't touch him. They simply occupy his personal space, their silent, spatial positioning forcing him backward. It is a pattern interrupt, so absolute that Ryland's brain stops searching for insults and starts searching for an exit. "You can't do this." Ryland's voice is thin now, stripped of its bourbon-soaked arrogance. One of the guards, a man with a jagged scar across his knuckles, leans in. He doesn't whisper a threat. He simply shows Ryland a tablet screen. On it, a live feed shows Ryland's luxury car being towed from the hospital lot. His digital access codes are flashing red. He is being erased in real time. Imani watches from the threshold. The "why should I care" factor is gone. She no longer feels the need to witness his downfall to feel whole. She sees a small, desperate man who survives on the echoes of the people he breaks. Without her fear to feed on, he is nothing but a noise the hospital is about to filter out. "Open the doors," Seo Jun commands. The magnetic locks release with a pneumatic hiss that sounds like the hospital itself is exhaling. The guards step aside, creating a narrow, humiliating gauntlet. Ryland doesn't walk, he scuttles. He passes the empty nurse's station where a single monitor now displays his own face under the word "restricted." No one shouts. No one hits him. The silence that follows him out is heavier than any physical blow. It is the silence of a world that has decided he no longer exists. As the outer doors close behind him, the violet emergency lights flick back to a warm, steady white. The high-pitched whine of the security grid dies down, replaced by the soft, rhythmic thump-thump of a distant heart monitor. Imani turns away from the exit. The hallway, which once felt like a narrow trap of teal and cold linoleum, suddenly looks different. The perspective has shifted. The walls seem wider, the ceiling higher. The air no longer tastes of bleach and dread. It tastes of beginning. She takes a step forward, her red dress catching the light, realizing the shadow that followed her for 3 years didn't just leave. It was incinerated. But as she looks at Seo Jun, she sees him staring at the elevator, and the countdown on the floor display is moving fast. Subscribe now to see if they make it out before the next shadow falls. The outer world smells of rain and wet asphalt, a sharp contrast to the recirculated, antiseptic breath of the maternity ward. As the glass doors slide open, the humidity clings to Imani's skin like a warm embrace. She doesn't rush. Her stride is measured, her weight balanced, her crimson dress a vibrant defiance against the gray city morning. Seo Jun walks beside her, his hands tucked into the pockets of his black wool coat. He has dismantled a man's life in the span of a heartbeat, yet his expression remains as serene as a mountain lake. He doesn't look at the black sedans idling at the curb or the men in charcoal suits who vanish into the shadows as they pass. He looks only at the path ahead of Imani. The hospital records have been flagged, Seo Jun says, his voice a low, rhythmic comfort. Rylan Vance is a ghost in this city. He has no shadow left to cast on you. Imani stops at the edge of the sidewalk. She turns to him, and for the first time, she doesn't see a mystery box or a mafia boss. She sees a mirror. She sees the reflection of the woman who survived 3 years of silence to build a life from the ground up. You told me once to stand still, she says, her voice steady and resonant. I thought it was about waiting for help, but standing still is how you let the dust settle so you can see your own hands. Seo Jun offers a rare, microscopic incline of his head. Safety is not the absence of danger, Imani. It is the presence of authority. Today, that authority was yours. She reaches out, her fingers brushing the cold wool of his sleeve. Not to steady herself, but to acknowledge the partnership. The baby moves again, a strong, rhythmic pulse that feels less like a warning and more like a drumbeat. For the first time, her pregnancy doesn't feel like a vulnerability Rylan could exploit. It feels like her greatest work of art, a masterpiece of endurance. I can take it from here, she says. It is a statement of fact, not a dismissal. Seo Jun understands. He steps back, opening the door to a waiting car. Not his, but a private car she hired herself weeks ago. He respects the boundary. He honors her independence because he knows that a queen who cannot walk alone can never truly lead. If the world ever grows too loud again, Seo Jun whispers, remember the silence of that hallway. It belongs to you now. Imani slides into the seat, the car door closing with a soft, expensive thud. As the vehicle pulls away from the curb, she looks back at the hospital. The teal walls, the flickering lights, and the man who tried to break her are already receding into the distance. The why should I care factor has reached its final resolution. The audience doesn't just see a woman who survived. They see a woman who conquered. She is the master of her own geometry now. She leans back against the leather, her hands resting peacefully over the new life growing within her. The streetlights flicker past in a blur of gold and white, but the shadows don't follow. Nothing follows her out. Not the fear, not the shame, and certainly not the past. She is finally, irrevocably, free. If you chose not to subscribe, leave a comment below. What part of Imani's journey made you feel the most uneasy?